People think that if I buy a house, it's my house. It's my house where I live. Even if it affects your economics, your financials, you still think about it. Although, please make a note, although it affects your wealth, your long term wealth, it affects money, it affects your financials to a great extent, but still, it's an emotional decision. Young families first go and buy a house. And I can understand no one better than me to tell this because I purchased my first house in Hello my and welcome to my channel. I'm glad you could join me today. And today is a very important topic. The reason I say it is important because in the last few months, I've been actually meeting a lot of families, and I feel that this is a very huge problem. And even in my last, my one of my previous videos, the first video in 2025, I talked about the GDP and and also a plan. And in that plan, I talked about investing in equities, SIPs. And even in my previous videos, I've talked about some of the wrong decisions we have made, which has affected our wealth. Maybe decisions we made in the 30s, which affect in our 40s. But if you are a young family, I want you to prevent you. I want to stop you from making those wrong decisions because these wrong decisions will impact in the next 20, 30 years. And today's video is about that. It's about why you should buy your first mutual fund before you buy your first house. It's a very important decision. Many make mistakes in this, and I do not want you to make that mistake. I want you to make the right decisions and grow your wealth. Hi, I am Frankie Fernandez, and I'm a certified financial planner. I'm a financial coach. I'm a money and marriage coach. I also help families build their relationship. I believe just making money is not enough. You need to make money and also ensure you do not sacrifice your family. My videos are focused on helping you build your wealth, but also ensuring that you also build your relationship. You do it together. So grow your wealth together and enjoy your life. So even much later in years, in your retirement and even beyond, you'll enjoy your life rather than having just wealth, but not having peace of mind. And the reason I'm making this video is because I see time and again, young families continue to do this mistake. I've already done a video in the past on property and investments. That is a far detailed video. This will be more of a high level conceptual, and I want you to pay attention these next few minutes. Stay till the end and you will understand quickly, very crisply, why you should make this decision. Okay, so let's get into the main video on why you should have your first mutual fund before you have your first property. Why is it that young families, the moment they get married or even before they get married, think of a house? And I can understand no one better than me to tell this because I purchased my first house in my late 20s, probably mid 20s. And I've explained in my previous video, 3 properties, 2 mistakes and 1 lesson. It's a very detailed video. You can watch that. You can watch that to get to know all the numbers and my story. So coming back to why young families first go and buy a house. Number one, it's an emotional decision. Although, please make a note, although it affects your wealth, your long-term wealth, it affects money, it affects your financials to a great extent, but still it's an emotional decision. People think that if I buy a house, it's my house. It's my house where I live. Even if it affects your economics, your financials, you still think about it. Not just emotional decision, even family members, even your parents may ask you, when are you buying a house? The reason they ask is because they grew up in such an environment where house was important, but they could not buy a house, your own house. But remember again, a house involves huge cash outflow. So when you make a decision, it is going to affect your financials. And another reason why people buy a house is peer pressure. Your friends, your colleagues all have bought a house and they proudly talk about their house. Not just that. Societal pressure. You go around your relatives, your friends, you watch, there are some ads that come. All those lucrative ads invite us to buy a house. So that's the reason we buy a house. And then we think that what if the prices go up? I will not be able to afford. I had this feeling. What if the prices go up? I will not be able to afford. And finally, buying a house, it's a physical asset. So everybody thinks that it's a great investment option. Oh, I bought this house and, I bought it for a few lakhs. Now it's a few crores. Nobody looks at the returns, but they only think that it has made It has grown so much. But if you calculate actually the returns, it may be very less. So these are some of the reasons why everybody wants to buy a house. And once you buy that house, how proud you feel, it's an emotional decision. But I'll tell you what is the problem. What is the problem? So before I share the problem, let me share with you an article to show you a comparison between all the asset classes. So here is an article in BT Money today. This is in August 16, 2024. It says Indian equities, US markets, gold, debt or property. Which asset class has delivered highest returns over 15 to 20 years? Gold, often seen as a safe haven asset, has yielded a moderate return of 10.6%. Real estate, despite its reputation for long-term growth, provided a 6.4% return. And look at this comparison. In the last 15 years, it is given 6.4. In the last 20 years, it is given 8.4. But at the same time, look at the returns in the real estate. Look at the returns in equities. 16.1% in 20 years and 13.2% in 15 years. See the difference. It's a huge difference. Now let's get back to what is the problem. The problem is at 30, although you make this decision emotionally, you do not have the money. Obviously, you have worked and then probably you have spent on your wedding and buying some things for the house. So early in your 30s or late 20s, when you're married, you do not have money. So what do? Obviously, you have to take a loan. And home loans are the best things that you could do. One of the best loans that you could do because you're buying an appreciating asset. But remember, you are making an investment by using loan and you're going to pay interest. And I'm just taking an example here. So you buy a house of 50 lakhs and let's assume that you don't make any down payment. You take 50 lakh loan, right? The math doesn't differ much in terms of the comparison that I'm going to make. So I'm just assuming. So let's take 50 lakh loan and 50 lakh is the value of the property. And your loan costs around 9%. So with the tax exemption, etc., let me make it 8%. So what is the effective EMI you want to pay? So your effective EMI is around 41,822. So your effective EMI around 42,000. And you're buying this house at 50 lakhs, right? And what you do is every 5 years, you increase your EMI by 10% and want to repay your loan early. You actually are prepaying your loan. So what you're doing is you are actually increasing your EMI every 5 years. So from 42,000, you make it 46,000. And then later on, it grows to 50,000. So a 20-year loan, you repay in around 17 years. And by the time you have, and in 17, instead of 20 years, it becomes 17 years. And within 17 years, the value of the house at around 8%, although it is 6 to 7%, I'm giving it 8%. Your house value after 17 years, 50 lakh house is now around 1.8 crore based on the 8%. So the effective rate at which your property has grown is around 7.78%, 8%. So this is where the value of your house has grown. Now, so the house that was purchased at 50 lakhs, 17 years later, the value grows at the rate of 8% and it becomes around 1.8 crores. 50 lakhs has become 1.8 crores. That is around 8%. But because you paid interest over the last 17 years, your returns are lower, around 7.7%. So effectively, this is what is the returns you've got on your house. Yes, it is your own house. You enjoyed the house among your relatives, among your friends. Hey, this is you could actually tell them, this is my house. And the other things that you didn't have to look for houses on rent, but you could stay there as long as you wanted. Now, what is the rationale that most people who buy houses versus renting out a house, what is the rationale? What do they think? Why they go for a house? They look at the rents, typically for a 50 lakh house with 3% yield. the rents could be in the range of 12 to 13,000. Let's take an average 12,500. And at the same time, the EMI is around 40,000. So you just think that, oh, instead of paying the 13,000 rent, which is gone, which is not literally gone, you also get tax exemption. But let's assume that it's gone, it's an expense. On the contrary, against that, I can pay this EMI around 42,000, then the house becomes mine. That is the rationale which everyone uses. Now let's do one thing. Just assume that instead of buying the house, what you do is you pay the rent of 12,500 and the remainder, that is 40,000 minus 12,000, which is around 30,000, you invest that money as an SIP, right? As an SIP for 17 years. And we are not increasing the SIP will remain the same. Whatever extra rent that I have to pay year on year or every few years, the hike in the rent because of inflation, I pay that using my salary hike. So I do not touch the EMI. I do not touch the SIP. Whereas in the EMI case, we kept on increasing the EMI depending on assuming that our salary hike will go into paying the EMI or hiking the EMI, increasing the EMI. So to keep it fair, right? So what happens to an SIP of 30,000? So I actually looked at one of the funds for which has been there in the existence for the last 17 years. It's a flexi cap fund. I did an SIP. I entered into that software the SIP of 30,000. And what is the value of that SIP? The value of the SIP today is 2.93 crores because this fund has given around 16%. The markets also have given around 15-16%. Usually mutual funds give more. So let's assume that here it is given 16.33 and it is given 2.93. And how much did we get in that house? At the rate of 8%, it grew up to 1.78 or 1.8 crore. 1.8 crore by buying the house, paying the EMI, and 2.9 crore in an SIP. 1 crore, 10 lakh profit. So let's not take 16%. I've reduced it to 15%. On an average, the markets have given 15%. Although mutual funds give more, but I'm just taking 15%. At 15%, the returns, what you get is around 2.5 crore. There you have earned 1.8 crore on a house. And here you've got 2.5 crore. So 70 lakhs, around 75 lakhs extra, which means if you had invested 17 years ago, done an SIP instead of buying a house, and assuming you are 47 years old now, what you would have is around 2.5 crore, which means if you want to buy that same house, the house that was costing 50 lakhs, that same house you can buy for 1.8 crore and you will still have around 70 to 75 lakhs, which can be used for your children's education, because by then they'll be around 15-16 years. You still have a couple of years more. Assuming that even if they're 18 years, this you can use for their education for the next 4 years. You can buy your own home, no loans. You can use that for your children's education and later on for their wedding and whatever. You see the difference? Now, in these last 17 years, what has got impacted most? Right? Initially, when you bought the house, you pushed yourself because of various pressures. You bought the house. But when you buy the house, when you have to pay the EMI every month, right, that high EMI, what are you going through? That stress, that pressure. How it affects you? It affects you, your mental peace. It affects your relationship with your spouse because there are challenges for money. And it affects many other areas because you are not able to enjoy yourself because you're bound by it. Then the long-term impact is that you have a house, but you've not had enough money to invest and do an SIP to generate wealth for your children. And this is not just a myth. This is not just a story that I'm making up. I have talked to a number of families. They're in their 40s or 50s. And this is the problem. They have a house, but they do not have enough for their retirement, for the children's education. They don't have anything. And even in this case, you have a house, but just assume that you've not been able to save anything, right? But instead, if you did an SIP, you have additional money, 75 lakhs or plus 75 lakhs plus, which you can use for your children, for your retirement and everything. So what has affected is your relationship. And then the big impact is that you do not have now enough money for your children's education. They have to compromise. They cannot go to that college which they want. They have to go for a college which is probably not giving all that, which is not having all that facilities or those courses which your children want, or they have to take an educational loan. And then I've also talked to families where they have used their retirement money, their the PF money or whatever they had saved for the wedding of their children, compromising their own retirement, and they do not have now much money left. And remember that after 17, 20 years, the value of the house is not the same. It is not as valuable as a new house. So it won't grow at 7%. It will grow at 2 or 3% or even less. But you have a house which has become old. And by then you start thinking, hey, I need to buy a new house, another house, or probably sell this house and buy another house, buy a bigger house. So you get fooled into it because all lucrative houses now, newer houses are better houses, better facilities. So now you think, oh, I want to buy another house. And the same trap continues. And you get more stressed. But if you are done an SIP and now you buy your own house, you know what are the advantages? First of all, it's a new house. And all these 17 years, you lived in good houses. I've seen a lot of my friends who buy houses, spend a lot of money on woodwork, best of plumbing work, best of woodwork, floor, and everything. And then they get a transfer. And then they leave the house for others to live. And then they leave. Then they live in homes, probably not as good as their own home. Or they go abroad. Many of them. And by then, and this is the age when you're in your 30s, you have many transfers. You can grow from city to city. You only settle probably 40s or late when your children are growing and you don't want to change schools and you don't want to change your city. That is when you stabilize and that is when you should buy a house. But if you're done an SIP, what you would do? Now you can choose a house that you like. The size of the house, you know now, you don't need a great and a big house because your children will do their studies and leave the home. So you can think of a house or even bigger house because now you have the money, you have your own money. And even if you have to take a loan, for example, you want to buy a bigger house, you can take a small loan. Probably you feel that there can be tax exemptions or anything. Maybe the money that you've invested is growing at 15, 16%. So you take a loan of 8, 9%. You take a smaller loan. See the advantages. But you might say, hey, the last 17 years, I lived in my own home. But at what cost? What price did you pay? It has affected your wealth. It has affected your long-term wealth. It has affected all your financial goals, your retirement goals, your children's education and everything. And you cannot be financially free. You'll have to work for many more years. But if you have the money, if you buy your own house, and if you have enough money, then you can be financially free. You don't have to work or do the work that you don't like. You can do what you love. You can follow your passions. Warren Buffett married in 1952, but he bought his first house in 1958 because his wife wanted it and he wanted to make his wife happy. And he believes that a house brings stability because it's your own home. He continues to live in his same home. He's not excited about a fancy home. And he believes that if he had invested in S&P 500, that would be $10 million today. He believes, but of course, he believes that it has made his wife happy. And he had the money. It was just a fraction of the money that he had. Remember, he first purchased his equity before he purchased his own home. And what about Rakesh Jhunjhunwala? What are his views about buying a house? So Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, in his interview, he said he believed in staying in rent. He bought a house around 2005, 2006 for 27 crores, which was 45 crore worth when he gave this interview. And he says, if I had not purchased the house, but if I had invested, it stayed invested, it would be worth 1,000 crore additional money. So these are his views. Now, these are the top investors, equity investors of our time. And this is what is their view. So what should be your view? As I conclude, I want to say one thing, which is very important conceptually. Always have equity assets. Equities are the engine for your growth of your assets, of your wealth. First, invest in equities. First, buy your mutual fund before you think of buying a house. I'm not saying wait for 17 years to buy a house. Maybe buy in your early 40s or mid 40s when you have enough money, when you have made enough wealth from equities. And equities will compound at 15%. That means they will grow, they will double every 5 years. A house does not double every 5 years. It takes more than 10 years for a house to double. Yes, it's an emotional decision, but remember, you pay a very high price for buying that house. Instead, stay on rent as much as you can, build your equity assets from 30 to 40, your golden years, and then you can make a decision whether you should buy a house, where you should buy a house, how big the house should be, and how much loan to take. By then, you would have made so much wealth that you may not have to take a huge loan, or probably you can buy the house with your own money. So I hope you've got a gist of what is the difference between buying a mutual fund and buying a house. Remember the timing. I'm not saying do not buy a house, buy it later in your life, but first focus on equities, focus on building your wealth, focus on your financial goals, your retirement, children's education, their marriage, and other financial goals like your house or buying a car. Focus on those. Reduce your debt. Probably one of my upcoming videos will be what a debt can do to your investments. So focus on building wealth, focus on equities, and then you will have made a huge wealth. Then you can have your own financial freedom and decide. Your decision making becomes much better for yourself and for your children and for your entire family. Hope you liked it. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up. If you've not subscribed, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel, and let me know in the comment box what you liked, what you didn't like about this video. Is there anything that spoke to you personally? Are you going to make any decision regarding the things that we have talked today? If you have any questions, any clarifications you need, please let me know in the comment box. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.